There are three other types of references Word can assist us with that don't really fit well into our business plan. We just don't have that kind of information in there, but we can now discuss them without actually using a document, now that we know some of the basics on how references work in Word. These three types of things are footnotes and endnotes, citations and bibliographies, and a table of authorities. Let's go ahead and get started with footnotes and endnotes. Footnotes and endnotes provide additional information. We have information in the body of the document, but for some reason we don't want to continue to write about it in the body of the document, but put it as kind of an afterthought or something if it's of more interest at the bottom or the end. So they can be used to document references. That's one way to do it, instead of actually using the bibliography. They're commonly used in scientific and academic papers, and used less often in business documents, but that doesn't mean that they can't be used in business documents. They can really be used anywhere you think they'll be appropriate. What happens is Word adds a marker in the body of the document, and footnotes appear at the bottom of the page, related to that marker. Endnotes are absolutely identical, except they appear at the end of the document or the end of the section. When you create endnotes, you will be prompted whether you want them to appear at the end of sections if you have them in your document, or at the end of the document itself. And that's just a matter of what style guidelines you need to be following. So how do we add endnotes and footnotes? Well, first of all, we position the cursor, then we go to the References tab, use Insert Footnote Endnote, and enter the text. Or, we can also use the dialog box. By using the dialog box, we can choose the type, and by that I mean footnote or endnote. We can also choose the location for endnotes, and we can choose the number format. By default, it's going to be Arabic numerals, but we can choose Roman numerals, upper and lowercase, all of the same options that we've had for working with other things like page numbers. Then we simply click Insert, and then we type the desired text. Remember, it is going to be up to us to type whatever text we think needs to appear in the footnotes or the endnotes. Beyond that, though, it's just like entering text and formatting it. We can do whatever we want there. If we find we want to go back and edit a footnote or an endnote, we can do so by clicking Show Notes. Then we simply edit the note as normal. To remove it, we actually need to select the mark in the document. Don't try to just remove it from the footnotes section. We need to remove the marker, and the marker will then remove all of the text. By selecting the marker and pressing Delete, away it'll go like it never existed. Here are a few tips for footnotes and endnotes as well. If you pause over the mark within the document, you'll actually see a tooltip with the note. You don't actually have to display the note. But if you double-click the mark, then you will display the note, either at the bottom of the page, or it will take you to the end of the section or end of the document, whichever is appropriate. You can also cut or copy the mark and then paste it if you want to move or copy the endnote or the footnote itself. In draft view, you won't be able to see things at the bottom of the page, for example, so instead a notes pane will appear. Here you can view and edit things, and just close the pane when you're done with it. Remember that footnotes are going to move and the numbers will adjust as necessary if the document is edited. So if something used to be on the bottom of page 2 and it was footnote number 1, and then you edit the document so the footnote marker now appears at the top of page 3, that's okay. We don't have to worry about it. That will automatically adjust. The numbering will stay consistent even if you add, remove, and insert new ones, and the footnote itself will move to the bottom of the appropriate page. If you want to change the numbering scheme, remember that you can always use the dialog box accessed from the ribbon. Well, what about citations and bibliographies? Well, citations are actually what we do first, and then we create a bibliography from the citations. Bibliographies cite sources for information that's actually in the document. These are going to appear at the end of the document, usually in a section called Bibliography. Sometimes it's References, sometimes it's Works Cited. It depends on the style that you're following and your particular requirements. There are some standards for the format, and these include APA, the Chicago, and other types of styles that are commonly used. The beautiful thing about this feature in Word is that Word has all of these built in, so it knows how to arrange the information to work for a proper format. In other words, the way a bibliography, for example a book or a recording, is cited in APA format may not be exactly the same as it is in the Chicago format. As we have seen so far, the same is true for citations. The citations are simply marked in the body of the document. Source information, whether it's from a book or a website or a recording or a lecture, is going to be entered, and the beautiful thing too is it can be reused. When I was completing my master's degree, I kind of felt like I was cheating because at that time Office 2007 had just come out that also had this feature. For those who didn't know how to use it or didn't have it, they had to compile all of their information for their bibliographies by hand. I simply filled it into a field. Word then keeps all of my sources in kind of a database behind the scenes and makes it available for every paper that I wanted to write. I didn't have to re-enter information, even though I may have referred to the same journal article in 3 or 4 papers throughout the course of my degree. That saves us time, it's also consistency, and we don't have to re-enter it over and over again. If we want to access sources that we've already entered, we can do so using the Manage Sources window. What's the process of actually adding those citations? Well, first of all, we have to place the cursor. Then we're going to go to the References tab, select the appropriate bibliography style, and by that I mean things like APA. We only have to do that the first time we use it. Then, every time we need a citation, we simply do Insert Citation. We can also add a placeholder. For example, a lot of times when you're writing a paper, you may be writing the paper from your own ideas, but you know that whatever you just said needs to be cited. We're not supposed to be the experts yet. So we can add a placeholder knowing that we're going to need to find a citation later on to reference. We can click Add New Placeholder in order to accomplish that. If we already have the source, then we simply select it from the list. If we need to create a new source, we click Add New Source, choose a source type, for example, website versus book, and then enter the information that's required. Then we simply click OK. When it comes to managing citations, we're going to do that by clicking on Manage Sources. The sources appear in one of 2 lists. There's a current list for those that are in the active document, and there's also a master list for all of your previous documents. So if you've utilized an article, for example, in a previous paper, and now you want to reference it in this paper, you can simply copy it from the master list to your current list. The list can be sorted and searched, which may not be too important if you only have 3 or 4 citations, but if you're doing your doctoral thesis or your dissertation there, and you're going to have a long list of literature credits, you actually want to be able to sort and search for exactly what you're looking for. This can be a wonderful tool. When we get all of our citations marked, then we're actually going to create the bibliography. Place the cursor, usually at the top of the last page. I recommend placing a page or section break before the page that's going to contain the bibliography, so it always starts on its own page. Then we're simply going to choose Bibliography and select a style from the gallery. This is, of course, a field like we've seen so many times before, so to update it, we simply select Update Bibliography from the ribbon, or we can right-click on the bibliography itself and choose Update Field. Now for the last one, a table of authorities. This one may be something you haven't heard of before because it's specifically for references in legal documents. For example, Smith versus Jones. It's similar to a citation for a bibliography or an index entry, in that it documents the reference itself, where did it come from, and it also shows what pages the citation displays. So it's again like both a bibliography and an index combined in a legal setting. What makes it unique, of course, is that it combines these two and it contains information or fields that are relevant to the legal field, to things like Smith versus Jones instead of a book or a lecture that you attended. The table of authorities itself is organized by category, so we'll see all of the cases listed together, all of the statutes, etc. That's why you need to designate what type of category it is. When we're marking the citations, that's exactly what we need to do. We start by selecting the citation. We go into the table of authorities and mark the citation, or you can use the keyboard shortcut Alt-Shift-I. Edit the text to read as you want it to read in the table itself. Select the appropriate category that we've been discussing, and then enter the short citation. Those of you who will be working with this know the difference between a long and a short citation, and for those of you who don't, you probably won't be doing this anyway, so we're not going to worry about going into a lot of description here. Once that's done, we can either click Mark or we can click Mark All. By clicking Mark All, just like we can do in many places in Word, that actually automates it. We'll go through and find all entries that have the same text and mark them all at the same time. A huge time saver. All of your citations are going to be marked with a hidden TA field, short of course for Table of Authorities. For the actual table itself, we'll place the cursor, we'll go to the References tab, and we'll click Insert Table of Authorities. Now you actually know. For all of these different kinds of things that we're talking about, they are more similar than different. And even if you haven't seen one of them, I think you have a good idea now of how to create them. Footnotes, endnotes, citations for bibliographies, and tables of authority may not be used in every document. In fact, depending on your type of work or school project, you may never use some of them. but we've had a chance to learn a little bit about them here, and because we're so familiar with the common features of Office, we now know that utilizing them won't be an issue if or when the need arises.